Lesson 3, topic quadratic formula. Learning target, I can solve a quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula. The solutions of the quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, are x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where a does not equal 0 and b squared minus 4ac is greater than or equal to 0. Let's break that down. So for our quadratic formula, the solutions, meaning our x-intercepts of the quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, meaning it has to be in that standard form and it has to be set equal to 0, are, now this part is the quadratic formula. X equals negative b. Now this symbol right here in the middle is, you can see it's a plus sign on the top and a minus sign on the bottom. So we read this as plus or minus. That means we're going to be doing two operations. We're going to be doing plus and then we're going to be doing minus. Where a does not equal 0, meaning this first number can't be 0. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a quadratic equation. And b squared minus 4ac, you can see that that's the part underneath the square root. So you can see that b squared minus 4ac is that part under the square root. So that part has to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, the reason for that is because if we're not greater than or equal to 0, we would be taking the square root of a negative number. Now, when you try to take the square root of a negative number, such as negative 18, we get this error message, non-real answer, because we can't take the square root of a negative number and get a real solution. So when that happens with a quadratic, that is when we are going to have that no solution. So when you get that error on your screen, when you're using the quadratic formula, that means there's just no solution because it's not going to touch that x-axis. And then we will have some solutions where there will only be one, and then we'll have the case where there's those two solutions. So let's talk about how to use the quadratic formula. Solve the equation with the quadratic formula. We have m squared minus 5m minus 14 equals 0. So this is already in that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And it's okay if we have a different variable besides x. Sometimes the letter will be different, but it still works the same. Now in this case, there's no number in front of m squared, which means there's really a 1 there. So we are going to label our a, our b, and our c. So our a is 1, our b is negative 5, and our c is negative 14. And now all we have to do is take those values and plug them into our quadratic formula and then evaluate the equation. So in this case, instead of x equals, it would be m equals, because it's the variable m. And then we have the opposite of b. So opposite of b, which is negative 5. Every time you replace a variable with its number, you do have to put it in parentheses. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so we're going to do negative 5 squared, again putting it in parentheses, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and times c, which is negative 14. And then it's all over 2 times 1. So now once we have that all written out, we just need to use our calculator to solve. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get a fraction on our calculator, alpha button, y equals enter. And then we are going to type this in. So on the top we have negative, and then in parentheses, negative 5. And we're going to start by just doing the plus version. So we're going to start with the plus operation. Then to get a square root, we hit the blue button and then the x squared. In parentheses, negative 5, we square it, minus 4, and then in parentheses 1, in parentheses negative 14 to do that multiplication. And then on the bottom, we're going to do 2 in parentheses 1. Once we press enter, we get our value, which is 7. So I like to draw 2 arrows, and then I do plus on one side and minus on the other side. So when I did the plus operation here for that plus or minus, I got 7. So now I want you on your calculator to do the minus operation. Type in that on your calculator using the minus operation, and then check your answer in Edpuzzle. Second example, solve the equation with the quadratic formula. So again, we're still going to use the quadratic formula. So first we check, is it in the right form? ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. In this case, no, it is not, because it's not set equal to 0. So the first thing we need to do is change that -6 to a 0 by doing the opposite. Plus 6 on the right, plus 6 on the left. We still have -2x squared, -8x. And I can put -14 and +6 together because they're like terms. So that makes -8 equals -6 plus 6 is 0. Now that I have my equation set equal to 0, I can do my a, which is -2, my b, which is -8, and my c, which is also -8. Now, all we have to do is plug in our values into our quadratic equation. So we have x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is -2, times c, which is -8, all over 2 times -2. Now again, we get to type this into our calculator. So first step is getting that fraction alpha button, y equals, enter. Negative, in parentheses, -8. Again, we're going to do that plus version first. So we're going to do plus, square root, blue button, x squared, in parentheses, -8, in parentheses, square that, minus 4, in parentheses, -2, in parentheses, -8. Then on the bottom, we're going to do 2 times that -2. Press enter, and we get -2. So on the positive side, my answer is -2. I would like you to, again, do the minus version of the equation in your calculator and see what you get for your answer. So if you got -2 again, you are correct. As you can see on my calculator, I have the plus version and the minus version, and that gave us -2. And this happens when the square root value is 0. So as you can see, if we just take that square root piece and type it into our calculator, it gets 0. So when you add 0 or subtract 0, you're going to get the same value. So this is just one of those cases where we only have one solution, and our solution is -2. One last example for you. I would like you to try this one all on your own. Check your answer in Edpuzzle, and if you have any questions at any point, please come talk to me.